let's look at this application, right? So I can go to controllers and I see a home controller, which is the default controller. You will see here, because we have our web page that had the default page, which is always called index, and it's a method in the controller, just like the model view controller diagram I showed you earlier. This will go to an index page. About also returns a view and will go to the about web page. And contact will go to the contact web page. If we go to the views, which are the web pages, we can see that in the views under home, there's an about, contact, and index. These names match the methods in the controller. Now let's do our own page at this point. First, I want to create a model for my BMI. This is a BMI calculator, so I'm going to create a new model. And models are really very simple classes. They're just C# classes. So I'm going to add, right-click on models, click Add Class. This is just going to be a class, and it's going to be called body mass index.cs. That's what I'm going to use for model. Okay, so these classes, these models, are usually called POCOs, P-O-C-O classes, and that means plain old common language runtime objects. That's what the POCO stands. If you hear the word POCO, that means a very simple C# class. That's all. Well, let's look at our model and see how to compute the BMI and what data needs to be stored. So if you notice, right, the model should save all the data. Make sure that you stop the application from running, otherwise you cannot edit this. So let's look at this. The application that I ran earlier, right? Closing the browser does not close the application from running. All right, so here my POCO is going for BMI will be, I'm going to have a double property that's going to be the height in meters. That's what I need, with a getter and a setter. Why not? Then I'm going to have the weight in kilograms with a getter and a setter. And I'm going to have another method called BMI, another variable, right? But this only has a getter. So here we'll have a getter, and the getter will have will return the formula for BMI, which is the weight in kilograms, divided by the height in meters squared. And that's it. So this is my model, basically my class that controls the data. You can imagine this class going to databases, retrieving data, doing other stuff with data. So this is my data. Now, I want to create a controller for this, and then I'm going to create a view for it. So we'll start first from a controller to illustrate a little thing. A controller, I'm going to create a new controller. So I'm going to add a controller. If you are adding a controller for the first time, you might see a window that's different than this one that asks you to include dependencies. Just click on Include Minimal Dependencies and hit OK. That will do something called scaffold. It will scaffold your application, but it won't create the controller. This is only the first time. The second time around, you right-click and say Create Controller, which is what you have to do, and you will get to this window. And we're just going to create an empty MVC controller from here. What am I going to call this controller? It's going to be called default controller. I'm going to call it BMI controller. Does it have to have the same name as BMI calculator? No, but it's just a short name, you know, BMI, like that. BMI controller. I will create this. And my controller is being created right here. In the controllers, I see BMI controller. Okay, I'm going to use this class later, right? For now, BMI controller has one method called index, and it will return a view, which it's going to look for an index web page under the BMI folder in views. Look, I'm going to go to views. I only have views for my home controller, right? I need to create a folder called BMI. So add a new folder called BMI. And within this folder, BMI, I'm going to add a view. So add a view. The name of the view is going to be index. That's the main page for the BMI. It's going to be empty without model. That's fine. We're going to use a layout page. If we don't use a layout page, all the formatting gets lost, right? So, but if I use a layout page, it's going to just look nicer. So I'll look for layout pages here. If I go to views, shared, and here's the layout, CSHTML. That's what gives all the color schemes and the cascading style sheets to this. If I don't choose that, it'll just be a plain web page. So I'll click add, and we're going to add the BMI view. So I've created my little view here. It says title is index. We can change this. We can say, BMI calculator, and that's just going to change very minor things. Now, in this BMI calculator, so in the BMI calculator, I'm going to create a form where I can actually have all the all of my fields to fill out. So I'm going to say, first I'm going to go, welcome to the BMI calculator. Then after this, I'm going to create a form. And now we're going to do the following. We're going to go to form. The action for this form will be a special web page, right? So we'll worry about the action later, but that's the web page that it's going to submit to, right? And that is absolutely fine. We just need to be aware that there's going to be an action. Now, within this form, I'm going to have a label that will say weight in kilograms, and next to that label there's going to be an input, right? The type will be text. Now this is where you're going to put the weight in kilograms, right? So that type is going to be text, and the name is going to be weight, right? Something like that. You could create your form and continue creating your form like this, but we're going to save us a little coding by doing the following. We're going to add in this web page up on top a directive called model, and then I'm going to tell this web page what model class I'm going to be using in this view, just to prep me up a little bit. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to go to model, which is going to be my namespace, BMI controller, I think is the name of my application. BMI calculator, all caps. BMI calculator dot, and then models dot, and then body mass index, my model, right there. So that's going to be the model. Now, instead of doing this label weight in kilograms and stuff, or input type text name weight, instead of me worrying what type or name to give the input, I can say input ASP4, and then a field from my model. In this case will be weight in kilograms, and I even get like a little help. Then I'm going to have a little return there, and then I'm going to do label, and then if I don't want to type my custom thing, but my custom thing is just going to be my custom label is just going to be the name of the field, I can say also ASP for, and then this is going to be height, right? Height in meters. So then that, oops, that changes the label, that's fine. And lastly, not lastly, but now an input, and this input is going to be for the field height in meters. And then another line, and then a submit. So the type here is going to be submit, and the value will be compute. That's what happens in that's the value that's going to be written on the form. So we have our little application. Now the action, which page is it going to go to? Well, remember the first part of the website, so after you type in the root, the first part of the website is the controller's name. So it's going to go to the BMI controller's name, and it is going to go to a method called show BMI. How about that? It's going to say show BMI. That's where it's going to go. Okay? So this is my view. My view, remember, it's just a form, so I'm only taking care of the view aspects of this. My link to the model here is that it's just a little syntactic sugar so I can type these shortcuts. When the web page renders, it's not going to render like this. It's going to render with the correct labels and all that. Okay? So this is my index.html, CSHTML page. So let's run this just to see what happens. So by default, it goes to the index method of the home controller. We need to make it go to our controller. Remember the pattern. We do the controller, BMI, and then the web page, index. But index is also the default page, so I can just type that. And it'll go to my form, BMI. And here's my form. Now, in my form, I can put the weight here, the height here, right? And then say compute. But remember, compute, if you look down here at the status bar, if I say compute, compute is going to try to go to BMI, to the method, the BMI controller method show BMI. Look under the status bar. The show BMI is not there. It does not exist. So if I click compute, it says HB44 not found. You can't find this page. So let's go back to the application and finish the work. I need to stop this if I want to edit anything. So what I'm going to do, I have the view and I have the model. I need the controller, right? So I have my index method, but I do not have my if I go to views, whoops, I have the index method. What I do not have is the show BMI method. Remember here, my form is going to show BMI. Let's go to the controllers and create that method. We're going to create this method. We're going to say public iActionResult show BMI. Whoops, and there's of course that. And we'll just return view for now. So now we're going to create the method show BMI. So it goes somewhere, right? And if I return a view, then I need a web page called show BMI in my views. So let's create that here. So let's go views BMI, right click, add a new view, and we're going to add the show BMI view. Show BMI. It's empty without model. We can actually let's just say it's empty without model. Here it shares the same layout. Let's just click add, and we'll create it there. So here's my little BMI view, right? So we're going to use it later. Right now I have the whole cycle. So if I run this application now, right, I'm going to get something interesting. So I go to my main page and I will type in BMI, and that takes me to the index page of the BMI controller. I can type in anything I want for now. Here, anything I want, go on. And then hit compute, and at least it won't be black. It says show BMI. So now I have the whole cycle. Now I need to, the interesting thing now is I want to pass the data from here compute the BMI, and when I hit compute, show the BMI over here. And that's what's next. Stop the application. So, in the BMI controller, in my method show BMI, what I can do is I can pass data to a web page in many different ways. One is through the view data variable. So if I type here, for example, view data, this is a key value pair. So now I make up a string. So the string is going to be something. And I say, hello there. Okay? If I say hello there, now if I go to the view, here, remember, before displaying the view show BMI, I'm going to pass data in this view data variable that it's shared across the objects. So in the view, in my view show BMI, what I can do here is I can just say show BMI, and then in a paragraph tag, actually display, I can say view data something. What this does is it's going to go and retrieve this view data and put it here, just like it does here, view data title and stuff like that. Now, with the ampersand curly braces, you can have a little bit of C# code here. With the ampersands here, you can just type, one variable or one statement. So we can run this again. So here's my application, and I can go to my BMI index page. Type in whatever it is, so this and this, compute, and now I'm going to see the variable that I passed in the show BMI page. It says hello there. That's the variable. I passed this hello there was not written in the HTML. It was passed from the controller to the BMI. There are three main ways to pass information from a controller to a BMI. That's one. We're going to see another one, which is in my opinion, the preferred method to do this. So the other thing to notice is that if I don't specify anything here, the forms will post these variables, right? And I want to be able to use these variables. So the show BMI method, it's going to receive all these variables, the post variables for the three inputs, right? These are sent as variables. The labels are just labels, HTML labels. But the input for weight kg will actually send out a variable to this page. So will the height MT input will also send a variable to this page, and so will the input submit. How do I trap those variables and compute the actual BMI? Well, let's go to the BMI controller. When I get to show BMI, I will have parameters. And one way to get the parameters could be you can have individual parameters with their names here, right? So I can actually put the names of the variables and their data types. But I can also, if I don't know the data types, or some data types are files and some data types are something else, what I can do is to do this, use this syntax. It's bind the variables to a model. So what I will do is I'll say bind, and then the properties here will be which was weight kilograms, comma, and then height meters. I will bind that to a variable of type, what's my model name? I need to include my models here, I'm so sorry, using BMI calculator dot models, whoops, dot. So here I'm going to bind these two formed variables into a variable of type body mass index called BMI calc. It's going to call it that. So from the form, I'm going to, when I click on the show, when I want to go to the show BMI page, before I go there, I'm going to go through the controller, through this method in the controller. These variables in the form, I'm saying they're going to correspond to the getters and setters of BMI calc. And now I'll have the BMI calc with everything. And instead of data something, I can actually compute the BMI. So I can say, what do they call this BMI here? Called BMI calculator, calc dot BMI. So in view data something, I can just put the BMI. And that will compute it, because the BMI remembers that variable in my model that computes that executes the formula for body mass index given the weight and the height. And I am giving the weight and the height in this line up here. So let's run this and see what happens. My page, my home page, but I don't need to go there. I want to go to my BMI controller. This displays the form. So I don't know, weight is 175, height is in centimeters is 172, for example, and at the height in meters, I'm sorry, it's 1.72 meters, right? And then I'll click compute. This goes to the controller. Oh, it shows infinity. There's something wrong there, right? So it shows infinity here. Now, we're going to debug why that is, but at least it went to the formula, right? And it's not getting the weight right. So let's look at these variables here, see if they're, oh, this is why, this is misspelled, right? Height. Whoops, I need to turn this off if I want to edit, remember that. And let's get the right variable. Now, the important thing to notice here is that it actually passed values here, but it passed the height as 0, right? Because there's no variable called HEIHGT, right? I had a typo. So this variable here didn't correspond to any of the variables of a body mass index model. Therefore, that was 0. Therefore, the BMI was infinity. Now we have the correct name here, right? We have the correct name here. But I'm not going to pass it like this. This is too cumbersome, because you see strings are dangerous. A little typo and, everything's thrown off. So instead of passing the view data here, what I'm going to pass is the whole model that I just got. I'm going to pass, there you go. I'm going to pass the model, the BMI calc. That's the model. Again, the form will submit these two variables. And this line here, this bind, will bind these two to the corresponding variables in a variable of type body mass index, which is my model. I can pass that variable, basically a whole model filled with weight and height, to the view. And in the view, I can use it. So let's go to the view. The view is, if my method's called showBMI, my view is showBMI.cshtml under BMI, because this comes from the BMI controller. So I'll go here. Instead of view data something, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another line for the model. So the model that I'm going to use in this page, the model that I'm going to be passing, is going to be part of the BMI calculator namespace dot models, and the model exactly will be a body mass index class. So here, instead of doing view data something, what I will do instead is I will say model dot BMI. Whoops. Model dot BMI. So all three components of this, I have created a model, which is the body mass index, which contains the properties, and then one property that only has a getter, which basically combines these other two. That's the body mass. We have the model. We have the view. One, to enter the variables and submit them to a BMI show BMI. So the BMI controller show BMI method, right? I can actually have a little syntactic sugar for this, but for now this is fine. Now I submit it to this controller show BMI. Show BMI, the show BMI method will actually do something and then pass the data to the showBMI.cshtml. So let's look at the show BMI method, show BMI.cshtml. It will receive a model from the controller, and the model is going to be of type body mass index, and I will display the BMI variable of it. That's all I'm doing. So let's run the application. Okay, so we're in our web page, and I'm going to go to, of course, my BMI section of the application. We get to our form. I'm going to put 175 kilograms. I'm sorry, weight in kilograms, that's a lot. I'm going to put 80 kilograms. And the height in meters, it's going to be 1.72, and that should receive a fairly okay BMI. So I'll compute it, and I have a BMI of 27, right? This is the computed result in the show BMI page. I want to go again at it. I can have, say, for example, someone really heavy will have 150 kilograms, also measuring 172 centimeters, and that BMI is super high, 50. Right? And if I'm going to have someone that weighs 100 kilograms but then is 2.8 meters tall, that's about 7 feet or a little something like that, then this person's rather skinny and the BMI is going to be very low. And that is the BMI application with model, view, and controller.